Here we are at the old school gun school. What I brought you today is some information on the active shooter. Now, the active shooter is a problem here in the United States. It's been going on for more than 40 years, for goodness sakes. And so there's lots of information out there. You can read all about it on the internet. You can read about it on Facebook. You can read about it on the University of YouTube and other places. And so I've interviewed, this is my most recent interview with Ed Monk. And Ed has written a book about the first 30 seconds of an active shooter's quest. And so, pretty interesting. If we know what to do and when to do it, we may be able to avoid a catastrophe. But it all happens very fast. And so, take a look at this, get your opinions going, and is this information that you could use? There's many different things to do. This is just one way to do it. Take a look, see if it might work. Hello, I'm J.B. Heron with the Old School Gun School. I'm lead instructor. And here today in our studio is Mr. Ed Monk, who's been on our classroom many times, and we're looking forward to having him back. I've made some notes, and so I'll try to stay on track. And so many of our industry leaders, including myself, has been urging Ed to write a book for many years, and now he has. And so what better reason to invite him back to our law conference that's coming up this fall. And so Ed will be there in person to teach from the book and go much deeper dive than we can do here online or that you could do in print on the book. And so if you're interested in the topic, this will be it. And the topic is the active shooter problem. And boy, it hasn't been around forever. You know, when I was growing up, none of us boys decided it was a good idea to shoot up the school. And we didn't shoot up the church. We didn't shoot up the malls. We just didn't do it. So why are things different now? So we hope to get some information on that as Ed joins us on our conference this fall. And so we plan to bring the book there. So we'll have books there for everybody. And in writing such a book, Ed, that's a ton of work, for goodness sakes. So at the Urban Self-Defense Conference this year, everybody will get the information firsthand from Ed. So there'll be time to talk to him, time to get some questions answered. You'll go away with a lot of good, solid information that would be impossible to get in any other format. And so plenty of time to talk with Ed and to get those questions answered. And so, Ed, glad to have you back again, buddy. And so what do you plan on bringing with you when we start talking about this topic of the active shooter problem? What can you tell us about that?
Well, what I'm going to bring is my 17 years of research on the topic. I started researching this topic sheerly out of personal interest back in 2007 when I retired out of the Army after 20 years of being an armor officer, active duty. And then 10 days after that, started teaching public high school at a very
Wow.
good school. So I left a profession where day to day normal stuff we did was planning to do deadly violence against other humans while they were trying to do the same thing with us. That's what combat arms in the Army is. And then I plopped into public education where violence is not discussed, it's not planned for, it's not allowed. So on those first few days of being a teacher, there with the other teachers getting in processed before the kids showed up, where they're going over policies. And I was told, well, our policy, what we do if we have an active shooter, and this is 2007, so we've had school active shooters for 30 years at this point.
Wow.
What we do if we have an active shooter here is we announce it over the intercom, and all the teachers, what your job is to get all your kids in your classroom, pack them in the corner of your classroom in a really tight group, and just wait. And they didn't say this, but what I heard was, wait until he comes in your classroom and shoots you. And I thought, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. We've had 30 years of school shootings. That's the dumbest private in the Army knows. If someone's coming to shoot you, you don't bunch up in a group and make yourself very easy to shoot. You spread out and make yourself a harder target. So that's why I started researching this. I'm like, why are schools having policies that are so bad? I mean, not only will they not help, but they'll hurt. Other than a teacher pulling their own pistol and shooting their own kids for the active shooter, you can't make a plan that's worse than gathering everybody up in a big group. So that's why I looked into this to try to figure out why. And it's just that they're not equipped, they're not mentally prepared, they're not trained to deal with violence, and they
And
don't
these
want.
policies, these policies, they've been around for a while. And so we've seen them in use, and they're not working that well, are they?
No. So again, you would hope after one or two absolute failures, they would say, "Hey, this is not working." You know, if you throw a high fastball to a major league batter 3 different times at bat and he puts it over the left field wall every single time, you stop throwing him high fastballs. If a doctor is treating his patient with leeches and they keep dying, at some point you got to say leeches aren't the solution to this. But we've been at this over 40 years, and the majority, I would say 98% of public school policies in America are now this aren't the words in their plan, but they're basically their plan is we're going to take some evasive measures. We're going to turn out some lights, lock some doors, but you can shoot as many of us as you can find until the cops get here. And that almost always ends up with a victim count in the 20s, 30s, or 40s, which is what the active shooter wants because the reason most of them are doing this is to get famous. And you can't
We're,
get famous shooting one or two people unless you
we're,
shoot
we're
somebody
talking
famous.
about the results could be 20 people get shot, 30 people, even more.
Yeah. And so, you know, a famous quote by Mark Twain, there's nothing to be learned from the second kick of the mule. When the first active shooter ever attacked a school and we weren't ready for it, you could forgive it. You know, wow, who'd have thought this?
That's right.
But they've been doing it for 40 years, and they're extremely predictable. The active shooter, not in the day they'll attack or where they'll attack, but when they attack, what they do is extremely predictable, which makes them easy to plan for if
Yes.
we'll actually understand the threat and plan for it. So, in the presentation, or what I'm going to talk about is, you know, over 20 years as an armor officer, the Army has a very simple plan process for preparing to fight a potential enemy. And the first thing you do is you study that potential fight that you could have. So you have to study the enemy. Why is he doing what he's doing? What are the goals of that he wants to accomplish in doing what he's doing? What are the weapon systems he's going to have? And as important, what are his skill level on
Hmm.
those weapon systems? How is he most likely to act once he starts his attack? How is he most likely to act once we confront him in that attack? What are his strengths that we have to guard against? What are his weaknesses that if we know them, we can exploit them? And so that, and we're not doing that as a nation, not only schools, but businesses, some churches, etc. We just have these cookie cutter bumper sticker slogans, one size fits all, lockdown drill, run, hide, fight, that get us killed on the day that he shows up. But by studying and knowing what the future attacks likely to be like because of past attacks, then we make the best plan to respond to that attack if he comes to us. And we don't want a plan, and that's what most schools have, a plan. We want the best plan.
Oh, gosh,
And the
yes.
best plan ends the violence in the least amount of time, which results in the fewest amount of casualties. We don't want a plan that passes the state inspection. So when the state comes down, show me your active shooter plan. Yep, you've got one. You passed the inspection. We want a plan that on the attack day will actually save the most lives and have the fewest people shot. And then once you have that plan, then step three is logical. You train your people how to execute that plan. And schools aren't doing that. They just have these bumper sticker slogans of run, hide, fights, lock doors for safety. And those all work very well every day except on the day of the attack.
Oh,
So when I started studying this, I didn't discover the cure for cancer. I didn't discover cold fusion. I didn't discover time travel. I just saw the math. It's very simple, easy math. Once he starts shooting, the active shooter, he's going to shoot a new person every few seconds.
wow.
So the quicker we stop him, the fewer victims we'll have. And if you look at the average shoot rate of the average active shooter, he's going to shoot a new person every 3 to 5 seconds in that first minute. They come to a crowded public place to do these attacks. They don't go out in the middle of the desert, up on top of a mountain. They purposely come to a crowded public place where it's very easy, even for a low skilled person with a gun. It doesn't. These people aren't John Wick. They're usually a kid that stole dad's gun that morning. But if you get a bunch of people all bunched up together, it's really easy to go from your first victim to your second victim to your third victim.
Wow.
So, given the average shoot rate of an active shooter, the only way to have an expectation, a mathematical probability of a low victim count, which I kind of describe as single digit, 0 to 9, you have to stop him. The active shooter attack has to end within the first 30 seconds because if you let it go beyond 30 seconds, he's going to get 10 or more people. And there
Wow.
is no way to communicate with someone who's not currently at the attack site and get them to the attack site within 30 seconds. So by default, that leaves us with the conclusion that the people he came to shoot, the intended victims, have to stop him. It's the only solution math allows for if you want a low victim count. Now, if you're willing to tolerate 20 or 30 or 40 people shot, then just wait on a 911 call and the cops will eventually get here. But the cops are not the solution if you want a low victim count, because somebody has to feel safe enough to access a phone, make a 911 call. That has to generate a radio dispatch. Then the police that are dispatched have to travel there. And that includes cops on the property. I go to a lot of schools and they say, well, we have a school resource officer. We have a cop here on the property, on the campus already. So we're safe. And I have to hurt their feelings and say, no, you're not. Because if it's a middle or a high school, your shooter is one of your own students who knows if you have an SRO and knows who the SRO is. So if the shooter thinks or knows the SRO's in one place, he's going to attack a different part of campus. He will attack in a different building, a different wing, a different floor, a different side of campus. So even though, yeah, you've got a cop there, that cop is not going to hear or see the first shot. So even that cop on your campus is going to have to wait on a radio call. And often, and I train this to cops, often it's not a call that says there is an active shooter in the west hallway. Uh, Columbine got told disturbance in the west parking lot.
Disturbance.
Santa Fe got told, hey, the fire alarm's going off in the art complex. Parkland got told somebody's setting off fireworks over near building 12. And then Arapahoe, the SRO got a frantic call on the school radio that said, James, we need you. James was his first name. Of course, that's not helpful because it didn't tell them what they needed him for or where they needed him. So even often when the SRO gets some kind of call, they don't really know what it is or where it is. And they eventually have to find it. And the time that takes, too many people get shot. And that's why we had 34 at Columbine, 38 at Uvalde, 28 at Sandy Hook. So everything about this is time and math. Everything comes back to time and math. And they'll say, well, we'll call 911 and wait on the cops. That's why we have cops. Well, the earliest you could expect a responding cop to arrive at an active shooter scene is within the fourth minute. And an average active shooter will have already shot over 20 people by the time that cop gets there. So it doesn't matter how well trained, brave, and aggressive the cop that shows up is. That job's cop now is to try to keep it at 25 and not let it get to 30.
And that's
or
a
keep it
4 minute, a 4 minute response time by law enforcement.
Yeah, and that's after the first shot, and that would be miraculously fast.
That's really fast.
That would be miraculously fast.
And how many deaths do we think, or how many people got shot in 4 minutes?
Within the fourth minute, there will be over 20 people by that time. There's almost always over 20 people shot before the cops get the radio call. There's almost always over 10 people shot before the first 911 call is heard by the first operator. And I'll show all this in the presentation, the timing. I'll play you some Andy Brown at Fairchild Air Force Base. That is a very powerful video that Andy Brown gave me. It's the fastest 911 call I know of from an active shooter attack heard by a 911 operator of that jurisdiction. 46 seconds. That's the fastest one I have data on. And then it only took that dispatcher 15 seconds to listen to that call and radio dispatch police. 15 seconds. That's extremely fast. And then Andy Brown pedaled his bike. He was on bike patrol as a cop, pedaled his bike a quarter of a mile and shot the guy in a minute and a half. So he traveled there, engaged, and stopped the guy in a minute and a half from a quarter of a mile away. Unbelievably fast, brave, aggressive police response. And we still had 26 people shot.
Oh.
Andy did God's work. He was a hero, a brave, skilled hero, but he wasn't there at the hospital when the shooting started. So he kept it from getting to 30. And so that's what cops do when they arrive if they act correctly. It's extremely rare that the cops are there when the attack starts. Active shooters usually aren't that dumb or that unlucky when they do that. So this is all about time and math. Relying on the 911 call will almost always give you more than 10 and likely more than 20. We have to stop being an accomplice to our own murder and getting under tables, hiding in corners. It's helping the active shooter. We have to stop doing that, and we're not. In 1999 was the Columbine attack, which most people remember. Shot 34 people, the two shooters did. The majority of those victims were in the media center And some people can remember the teacher in there was on the phone with the 911 operator, which was recorded. It was played a lot in the media. And that teacher interrupted her conversation with the operator to scream at her kids in the library, heads under the tables, kids, get under the tables, stay under the tables, which as the shooters were coming down the hall towards the media center. And getting under the tables might be the right thing to do for a tornado or an earthquake. But if someone's coming into your room to shoot you, getting under tables that don't have tablecloths on them don't help us at all. And that was 1999. Well, 3 years ago in Uvalde, the exact same thing. The teacher told his kids when the shooting started outside his hallway, get under the tables, which has
Well,
no value at all. In fact, it makes the shooter's job easier. We refuse to study the enemy, this coming threat of the active shooter, and get the best possible plan. We just keep having run, hide, fight, cookie cutter slogans. Uh, and I don't know why. It seems crazy. And
boy,
again,
so
in the presentation, I'll talk not only about schools, we'll talk about attacks at businesses, churches, government offices, outdoor locations, and we'll go into details and pull out lessons learned. But schools are so important for two reasons. One is the age of the victims, but two is that you are, in most states, parents are required by law to send their kids there. And so the government says you must, by penalty of criminal prosecution, you must send your kids to this school. And then they just refuse to protect them. They refuse to do what is the best possible thing to protect their kids. In fact, in some cases, they make them do stuff that puts them at greater danger. And that's some of the stuff that we'll look at.
sounds like you're bringing a lot of information and knowledge, and we'll see that in person this fall at our conference.
Yeah.
And so, and then you do this all over the United States. And so, when you've done this in the past, what do you find is the biggest eye opener uh, for the students that come to see? What is that discovery thing? What do they? Oh, now I get it. What do they find is an important topic to take away?
From my point of view, surprisingly, of course, I've studied this for 17 years, but it's still surprising when people go, I never thought of the math before. I never thought of the time. Um, I worked with a school down outside of San Antonio a couple of years ago, and they had armed staff. They had a very few armed staff, and they're like, we do these drills, and we can, no matter where we say this, you know, made up active shooter in the drill, we always get to that location within 3 minutes, so we feel really good. And I'm like, well, at the 3 minute point, he will have probably shot 25 people. And when they saw that, they're like, oh man,
Oh,
we
wow.
never thought of that before. We never put the time to it before. And I don't know why people don't do that. Um, it's just logical that he's going to start shooting and keep shooting. It's like a fire that breaks out in your kitchen. If you put it out 10 seconds after it starts, you'll have a whole lot less damage than if you back off, call 911, wait on the fire department to show up, put it off. The fire will get put out either way, but the quicker you stop this progression of shooting, the fewer victims you'll have. And I haven't talked to anybody yet that says they don't want fewer victims. Everybody says we want fewer victims. Everybody says when this attack starts, we want it to end immediately. But we have to make this huge jump from wanting the attack to end quickly with a low victim count to planning to cause it to end quickly with a low victim count. And very little difference in words there, but it's 180-degree out on how we approach it. And the problem is, especially with schools, they desperately want a
Oh,
nonviolent solution to a very violent problem, and that doesn't exist. So they would rather type a policy, buy a product, do something other than face the math, which says you should not try to survive until the cops stop it. You should have it stopped. You should counterattack the active shooter like rabid wasp, and you should have it stopped before the first cop or ambulance gets on your property. In fact, you're already prepping and treating and possibly evacuating casualties. That's the only way to have an expectation of low victim count.
important stuff. And we're looking forward to hearing the details of this at our conference. And so thanks for joining me today. And we'll look forward to seeing more of you at our conference. And there's a book involved, so I'll be looking forward to that. And so, would you do a book signing there at the conference?
Absolutely. Anybody that has already bought my book, or I'll have some there with me that buy it. Absolutely, I'll autograph, no problem. Love to.
Ah, that'll be good. And so, Ed, thank you very much. look forward to talking to you again because there might be some other topics we'll ask you to dip into at conference. You have such a wealth of knowledge. We'd like to take advantage of as much of you as we can when we get you out here.
Looking
So
forward to it. Appreciate you inviting me to the conference again.
thanks for being here.